I'm honored to welcome you to the 2025 Inamori Ethics Prize ceremony at our beautiful Amasa Stone Chapel. This award, as you most likely know, and the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence are made possible through the visionary philanthropy of the late Kazuyo Inamori and the foundation that bears his name. I'd like to begin by recognizing representatives from the Inamori Foundation who join us here this morning. I ask that you please stand so that we can acknowledge you. First, Mr. Hayato Takanuchi, Managing Director of the Inamori Foundation, and Ms. Sayaka Hiroki. Welcome. We're so grateful that you have been able to travel here to Cleveland from Kyoto and be with us for this very important ceremony today. And thank you to the Foundation for the support that makes this possible. We look forward to seeing you in Japan in the fall. We also thank all of the campus and community partners who help make the activities of the Inamori Center possible. And of course, we're delighted to have student representation here today. First, I want to welcome members of the university's Latin Graduate Student Association and La Alianza. We're pleased that you've joined us and proud to honor Hispanic Heritage Month with you. We also welcome students from GELS, the Global Ethical Leaders Society. And finally, we're joined this morning by a large group of students from Shaker Heights High School and members of the Tri-C Mandel Scholars Program. We thank all of you for supporting our tradition of honoring global ethical leadership, and welcome to Case Western Reserve University. It is a great privilege to present the 2025 Inamori Ethics Prize to honor global ethical leadership. The remarkable group of past recipients of this prestigious prize includes leaders in genetics, business, environmental protection, philosophy, the creative arts, law, journalism, public health, and human rights. All have dedicated their careers to driving their respective fields to embrace exemplary ethical practices by their action and, importantly, by their example. This year, joining this esteemed group is Oscar Chacon, a courageous advocate for human rights and dignity for migrant populations, and a co-founder of Alianza Americas. Mr. Chacon's actions embody Dr. Inamori's belief that people, to quote him, people have no higher calling than to serve the greater good of humankind. We're able to give this annual prize at this exceptional celebration due to the outstanding vision of Dr. Inamori and our longstanding relationship with the Inamori Foundation. The relationship continues to flourish under the current president of the Inamori Foundation, Ms. Shinobu Inamori Katazawa. Our students, faculty, and staff, as well as the local and global community, have benefited immeasurably from the tremendous work of the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence. The center advances Dr. Inamori's philosophy of encouraging each of us to be an ethical leader and to do what is right as a human being. I'm now very pleased to introduce to you Shannon French, who is the director of the Inamori Center for Ethics and Excellence and the Inamori Professor in Ethics. She's also a philosophy professor and a globally acclaimed ethicist. Professor French leads Case Western Reserve's unique graduate degree program in military ethics and conducts cutting-edge research on the ethics of emerging technology, importantly including artificial intelligence. Please welcome Shannon French.
Thank you, President Kaler. And thank you all for being with us here today. I recently overheard a striking exchange outside of a local home supply store. A young woman was holding a sign that read, "No one is illegal on stolen land." An older woman with an accent I couldn't place went up to confront her in a pretty heated manner. And she said something like, "I'm an immigrant, but I came here legally. And if we let everyone in, I won't feel safe. Someone might be coming here to kill me." The woman with the sign challenged right back with equal passion, saying, What if they are fleeing people who are definitely trying to kill them? Having taught ethics for over 3 decades, I found a lot to unpack in that very brief encounter, especially in the context of recent and current events. There were so many concepts and values at play, as well as emotions. And I want to be clear about something. Emotions are part of ethical living. As Aristotle explained, for example, righteous anger is a virtue. If you are a good person, some things should, in fact, make you mad. Most virtues require courage as well, which entails overcoming another emotion, fear. To treat one another ethically, we must also exercise our moral imaginations. We have to honestly consider the world from other perspectives. This doesn't mean that we can't pass judgment on ourselves or one another. Taking the time to understand why someone thinks or acts the way that they do is not the same as endorsing those thoughts or actions. Taking a stand is good. Having integrity is about deciding what values matter the most to us and trying our best to live consistent with those values and to course correct whenever we fail, because none of us is perfect and we will fail sometimes. We each need to know where our personal red lines are, the lines that we won't cross, no matter what the pressures or temptations, the things that will actually make us take consequential actions, like ending a friendship, or quitting a job, or even leaving a country. If you don't know what you would make those sacrifices for, I'd submit that you don't know what you're living for either. The slogan on the woman's sign tried to convey several ideas at once, including the notion that the very idea of the ownership of land is kind of a strange concept when you think about it. What we call America is a land that has been a land of immigrants before any politics were involved. Thousands of years ago, people migrated across the Bering Strait to establish the First Nations here. Centuries passed, bloody conflicts arose over and over again about whose land it should be. Many were brought here against their will. Others fled here. Once the United States was established, some migrants were welcomed, while others were repelled. The first U.S. immigration laws arose in the 1790s, and the idea of legal or illegal immigration was contentious from the very start. And meanwhile, evolutions in international law muddied the waters even further. But looking at laws never tells the whole story. Laws try to codify values, but they're born of compromise. Ethics sets a higher bar, and it should. Ethics demands that we try to be just and wise and kind and merciful all at the same time. It's exhausting but important. Above all, ethics centers our humanity. We have more in common than that which divides us, and we all deserve basic dignity and respect. Laws that dehumanize and strip away rights are no excuse for failing in our moral obligations to one another. We owe each other more, and it is up to each of us to hold that standard, though the heavens fall. We cannot let "I was just following the law" become the new "I was just following orders." We claim to be better than that, and we must be. I would now like to invite up to the podium Provost and Executive Vice President Joy Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Before we turn to today's honoree, I'd like to share a word about the beautiful doll that you see up on stage. This remarkable work of art was commissioned by the Inamori Foundation specifically for Mr. Chacon. She is dressed in the 12-layered ceremonial robe once worn by women of Japan's imperial court. Traditionally, white robes such as these are chosen for sacred ceremonies, symbolizing purity and the strength to face new challenges with a clear and unblemished heart. This doll stands with us as a reminder of resilience, renewal, and the enduring value of life. That same spirit of resilience and renewal is embodied in the life of Oscar Chacon. Around the world, and especially in migrant and immigrant communities, Mr. Chacon has been a steady voice for justice, dignity, and for hope. A naturalized U.S. citizen, he has served in leadership positions at the Chicago-based Heartland Alliance for Human Needs and Human Rights, the Northern California Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, the Boston-based Centro Presente, and several other community-based and international developmental organizations. In 2004, he co-founded Alianza Americas, a network of 97 organizations across the U.S., Mexico, and Central America, working for justice, equity, and opportunity. He served as its first executive director for nearly 20 years and continues today as a senior strategy advisor. Mr. Chacon is a powerful voice on migration, development, and issues affecting U.S. Latino communities, bringing courage, compassion, and leadership to everything that he does. His work reminds us that the struggles of immigrants are not distant, they are not abstract, they are deeply human stories of courage, belonging, and the pursuit of a better life. Mr. Chacon's leadership has challenged lives and shaped movements. He has given voice to those too often unheard. And in doing so, he has reminded us of our shared responsibility to build a more just and humane society. He is an advocate, a leader, and a champion for immigrant communities. And today, he is our 2025 Inamori Ethics Prize winner. I now invite you to watch a short video on our honoree.
I was born in San Salvador in 1961. I was the second of four. The memories mainly are my trips to visit my maternal grandparents, both of whom were peasants in the countryside without electricity, without running water. Having to take part in all the chores is something that I remember with great fun.
Those carefree childhood memories of Oscar Chacon soon gave way to the harsh realities of El Salvador's civil unrest, where government repression and violence touched daily life. He began to see why his parents were so devoted to the Catholic Church's call for liberation theology. Before long, he too was organizing food drives for striking workers.
And that kind of work made us a target by the Salvadorian government, and not just for imprisonment, but actually killing. That's when my parents basically said, we have to make sure that doesn't happen to you.
In January 1980, at just 18 years old, Oscar fled El Salvador and arrived in Brooklyn, New York.
I thought that I knew some English, but when I landed in New York and I tried to communicate, I realized that I could not understand what they were saying.
While learning English, Oscar cleaned floors at night. On a subway ride home, he spotted a flyer for a gathering of Salvadorans. At the event, he saw footage of a 1979 protest that had been violently repressed.
I was part of that protest. From that point forward, we gathered with these other Salvadorians to help educate more people about what was going on in El Salvador.
By 1981, Oscar's parents and siblings had joined him in New York. Amid the struggles of starting over, he also discovered an unexpected joy, reconnecting with a childhood friend from El Salvador named Myra.
So we were married in March of '82. We had our first kid in July of '83.
As his family grew, so did his commitment to justice. By the mid-1980s, Oscar was working alongside pro bono lawyers to support asylum seekers.
So even though I never applied for asylum, I began to learn that process by helping others.
He gained permanent residency through his wife, Myra. Seeking to broaden his reach, Oscar moved his family to Boston and joined Centro Presente, advocating for immigrant rights, and later becoming its first immigrant person of color to serve as executive director.
But I had the dream already of building a national network of Latin American immigrant-led organizations in the US.
That vision continued to expand as he moved to San Francisco and later Chicago, where he joined Heartland Alliance, building national connections and advocating for just immigration policy.
And in 2004, President George W. Bush gave a speech to the country.
We must make our immigration laws more rational and more humane.
That became the catalyzing event that led to what has come to be known as Alianza Americas. I mean, I've been attacked and I've been told I should be dead by people who don't like what I have to say. Even my wife, has asked me, aren't you afraid? I decided back in the mid-1980s, as soon as I was able to travel to El Salvador, for US groups to learn about the human rights situation there. Every time I did that, I could have been killed. But I thought of all the people whose lives depended on the world knowing that they were there. And I did not let fear stop me.
For nearly 2 decades, Oscar led Alianza Americas, championing justice and dignity for immigrants. Today, he continues the mission alongside new leadership. At home, Oscar and Myra, married for 43 years, share joy in their 2 children and 3 grandchildren, who remain a constant source of inspiration. And today, the Inamori International Center for Ethics and Excellence at Case Western Reserve University is proud to present the 2025 Inamori Ethics Prize to Oscar Chacon.
Oscar, we wish to recognize your profound ethical leadership as an advocate for the dignity and rights of immigrants and migrant communities. Your efforts have served to improve the condition of humankind in a significant and lasting way. Thus, on the recommendation of the Inamori Ethics Prize Selection Committee, it is my pleasure to present to you the 2025 Inamori Ethics Prize Medal.
After that video, which is beautifully done, because it summarizes in many ways my life. Just give me a second. Let me begin by thanking people who obviously are behind this decision. I'd like to begin by thanking the Inamori Foundation and the representatives with us today. I want to also thank President Kaler, Provost Ward, here at Case Western Reserve University. I also want to thank the former recipients of this award, because in so many ways they are examples of ethical excellence, and they are role models for me and many other people who want to walk the path of ethical behavior, ethical example. I also want to thank my family, because without them, I would not be who I've been up until today, beginning with my parents, Rita Chacon, my father, Juan Antonio, who left us a couple of years ago, but his teachings have been so important to me. I also want to thank my siblings. You saw some of the pictures in the video. It's 4 of us: Yanira, the oldest, Guillermo, the one next to me or following me, and Maria Elena, the youngest of the 4 Chacons. They've been constantly with me and have played a substantive role in shaping who I am. I also want to thank my wife, who's much more than my wife. She's a lifelong companion in this journey. Mayra, sitting right there, next to people I also consider family, Sue and Mary. I also want to thank my beautiful kids, who have actually taught me so much. Oscar B., who's now 42, and Rebecca, who's now 36. And of course, they have given me a new source of joy and pleasure. They've given me 3 grandkids and 1 on the way. Raizo, who's about 8, Rio, who's 3, and Serena, who's about 18 months. A friend of mine asked me after my first grandkid arrived, how did I feel? And I said, it's unique. It's a very special experience. And he said, let me tell you what my grandpa told me. My grandpa told me that if he had known how much he was going to love the grandkids, he would not have had kids. Which, I kind of agree. But I also want to be thankful to colleagues of mine, especially colleagues of mine at Alianza Americas. This was not a project that I undertook alone. This was, from the beginning, a collective effort. And those people I worked with the past 20 or so years have also been incredibly important in my life. But not only my colleagues at Alianza Americas, I also want to thank everyone with whom I've worked with the past 45 years in different organizations, different projects, because they've all, have actually shaped who I am today. Now, when I was asked about a title for these comments, I really had a hard time, trying to come up with a title. And the best I could come up with, was the ethical value of truth telling. Especially in times of great deceptions and times of lies, becoming so incredibly powerful. But the reason I chose that title is because I have always believed, in this principle of telling truth. Being transparent, being accountable. To me, they define very much what I have tried to do, throughout my life. But I recognize, as I reflected, even after I sent the title to Shannon, that speaking of truth in itself has become very tricky, because I always used in the past, when trying to teach people the importance of appreciating different points of view, I use a cube, painted in different colors. I placed it in the center of the room, and I ask every person to tell me how did the cube look like. And depending what color they were looking at, that's what they saw. That was their truth. In the reality we are living in today, sadly, it's hard to say that there is a truth. And so truth becomes very much connected to, yes, point of view, and connected to the values we embrace. The ideas that we embrace to drive us in doing what we do. But I recognize, that it is very much a challenge nowadays because some people believe in certain truth, and once you go deep in that belief, it's very hard to move people, from that belief. And I'll get to that in a moment because I believe there is a way around it, but it's not easy, and I just want to acknowledge that part. Clearly, technology plays a big role, in how complicated it's become to actually speak of truth in the world we live in. Frankly, in the past, we usually believed that truth was defined by facts. But even facts have become a matter of dispute. You cannot really speak as if you are the only holder of factual basis, to speak of any truth. But with that, let me move to perhaps, subjects that have defined my life. Not that I necessarily chose them, but they were just what I encountered, throughout life. And I'm talking about subjects such as immigrants and migration. Somebody asked me yesterday if I chose this path, early on. And the answer is no. I didn't necessarily choose this path. I was in a way accidentally placed in the roles I have had to play. And little I knew 45 years ago that issues like immigrants and migration were going to become so incredibly polemic, so incredibly controversial. And as I have studied, the history of migration, especially contemporary migration, I recognize that the way a lot of people feel about immigrants is not accidental. The way a lot of people feel about immigrants is the result of conditioning that has been happening since at least the mid-1970s. Namely, a narrative that suggests that today's immigrants are some sort of threat, some sort of problem in our society. And that narrative has been propagated very effectively. Many, many members of Congress, both parties, have accepted, some more, some less, this notion that immigrants are a problem. When in reality, if you review carefully economic, social, demographic data, you will find that it is hard to make the case that immigrants in the US, and for that matter in other countries, are a problem. They've been adding incredible benefits, to our nation. And yet, here we are, dealing with a reality that on a daily basis injects fear, in a lot of communities. Immigrants have been systematically dehumanized, demonized, and these are preconditions that you need to advance to be able to then accept, the treatment that we give, to immigrants. And this is not new, in the history of humankind. This is, sadly something that we've seen many times in the past. And I believe that this notion that immigrants are a problem and that therefore, we need to punish them, we need to restrict them, we need to exclude them, has sadly driven our policy response, to immigrants. You'll be surprised if you were to take the time to read a legislation passed in September of 1996. It's actually called Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act. That is the law today. That is the law that the current administration is using to do most of what it does. I invite you, to try to take the time to read at least a summary of it, and you'll find that it is highly punishing, highly excluding, and highly restrictive, which again are not strange principles if one has been following, the evolution of this subject matter the past several decades. But I believe that even though this is, frankly, the policy framework from which, we've been having to manage, the work that we do, with immigrant communities, I really believe that most people in the United States of America actually make the right choice and take the right action when it comes to appreciating, what immigrants are. I've been given examples just of the last few days, of the kind of kindness, really spontaneous acts of love, that people show. And that's something that actually makes me very hopeful, about the future. For a long time, I really embraced the notion that truth ultimately will set us free. That's a principle that is actually embedded in many religions, no matter which one you want to choose. But I really believe that this is a principle we should aspire, to actually make truth. I remember, and I've shared this the last couple of days, in my early years as a young teenager, I became involved in social economic justice work through the Catholic Church, in a very peculiar moment in the history of the Catholic Church in Latin America, and surely in El Salvador. I cannot say that I am a practicing Catholic anymore. Frankly, I stopped being a practicing Catholic a long time, but I did learn a few things, from those days. I learned that if I can treat others the way I like to be treated, the world would be a lot better than it is. And I remember traveling once to El Salvador. Actually, Mary and Sue were with me in that trip. And we encountered a pretty famous theologian, John Sobrino, a Jesuit in El Salvador, who was spared from being executed in November of 1989, almost by accident. They asked, the group of people I was with asked him, how can we Americans become better Christians? And his response was really amazing. His response said, why do you want to complicate your life so much? Why don't you aspire to become better human beings? That may be enough. Because in reality, what Christian faith demands from believers is tall order. It's not a small thing. And I do believe to this day that learning how to be human beings that are proud every morning to see ourselves in the mirror is probably a pretty high standard. for most of us. And as I said, I really believe in this principle of treating others the way we like to be treated. And I think that that would go a long way in helping us improve the condition we are in. Let me try to come to an end by saying that the world we live in today has been very much infested by hatred. And hatred is an emotion. Fear is an emotion. It's very hard, to really move people out of fear, or out of hatred by trying to explain things, because it doesn't really connect, with the cognitive capacity. It's really emotional. And I firmly believe that there is a force very capable of neutralizing fear and hatred. And that force is love. In the end, when I try to rationalize why I have done what I've done with my life, it really boils down to that. Trying to be loving, to others. And trying to be loving not blindly, but trying to be loving with a sensitivity to how to relate to those who may be most vulnerable. The people who may need most support, most of a helping hand. That's really what has driven me throughout my life. And I am, of course, the first to accept, that we are undergoing a moment of darkness, a moment of great difficulties, where many of the very foundations of what we believe was our democracy in the U.S. are being shaken. And it almost feels like we are in a long tunnel where you can hardly see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I also believe that we are in a moment in history where, even though light at the end of the tunnel may look so far, we are in a moment in which leapfrogs are possible. So let's not despair, let's not lose hope, because I believe that if you're here today, it's because more or less you would agree with most of what I have said this morning. So thank you very much. Thank you, Inamori Foundation. Thank you, Case Western University. It's a great honor for me to become the recipient of this. Thank you.
Oscar, thank you for those very, very timely words. And we are honored to celebrate your leadership and lifelong commitment to justice and dignity for immigrant communities, especially meaningful as we recognize Hispanic Heritage Month. And to our audience, thank you for being part of today's celebration. We hope that you will join us later today for the academic symposium titled Immigration Ethics, Obligations and Opportunities, which will be held at the Tincomville University Central Ballroom. Mr. Chacon will be joined by distinguished panelists Veronica Dahlberg, Executive Director of OLA, Ohio, and Margaret Wong, founder and attorney at Margaret W. Wong and Associates. This concludes the 2025 Inamori Ethics Prize ceremony. Thank you for being here, and please have a wonderful day. Thank you.